We now go to questions. Let me just ask, on one of my trips to Nigeria, I did visit the Fusion Center, which there was a great deal of cooperation beginning, and I mentioned that our ambassador, Mike Waltz, to the United Nations was actually deployed there as a Green Beret and a part of a Special Forces training component. There was a great hesitancy on the part of our government to engage that to the degree that would really make a difference. And I'll tell you what they told me. They said that they were worried about the applying the Leahy law so that we do not fund or train human rights violators. So believing that, I actually asked, I had a hearing, and Ed Royce did a hearing on the full committee, and we asked the Undersecretary of State under the Obama administration how many Nigerians could be trained. And she said, matter of factly, half. We don't need half, but a large number, half would be, that could be trained in counterinsurgency. They wanted night vision goggles. They wanted intel to track down Boko Haram and these other then emerging groups, ISIS West Africa, for example, and it never really materialized the way it could have. Now, one of the hopes I have, and we hope many of us have, coming out of this, will be that there will be a renewed effort to, again, support human rights trained people, men and women who are not accused, and certainly that is a very difficult thing to prove one way or the other. The Leahy law is very hard to implement. And I sat through an actual session with a Foreign Service officer in Abuja as he went through names, and just to get a sense of how robust the effort is. Very, very hard to do. But again, so many can be trained. And I think what we are hoping will come out of this, in addition to a whole lot of other things, is a very highly trained counterinsurgency force that will take it to Boko Haram, the Fulani terrorists, and others. I note that just today, there's a report that just came out that the president is not going to a G20 meeting, and he's deploying additional people to a place where there were killings in Kawara. And I hope they're realizing we're not kidding in the United States. The President of the United States is absolutely committed to this. Marco Rubio is as well, and right on down. And what are we doing? We want to help, as I said earlier, those who are at risk, those who are dying, those like that wonderful woman we just saw a moment ago who lost 5 of her children. We don't want that to happen anymore. And, I do believe that the art of the possible, when you have a will, when you have a focus, you can have great achievements for peace, and that's the hope here. So last night, and I know that my colleagues also had meetings with this high-level delegation, and ours went for almost 2 hours. And I said, think of us as partners. Yes, we do have the ability to levy sanctions, and you may not like it, but we're doing it because we care about the people in your country that are being slaughtered, both Christians and Muslims. So your thoughts on really getting this cooperation off the ground? When I was there, I talked to a lot of people, and I followed up once I got here, and they had all these recommendations. Only a few, if any, were ever carried forward with, and that's unfortunate. Some were, but I think a top-to-bottom review of what can be done, what does it take, and then meanwhile, on the humanitarian side, and we asked this last night, and Mr. Huizenga asked this as well of our 2 witnesses from the administration. The government really needs to do more for its IDPs. It has not, but we want to be helpful there too. Making sure that food, medicine, shelter is available to them. So the IDP camps that I've been in were awful. One was an old hotel that was just, makeshift turned into an IDP, and that was probably one of the better ones. So your thoughts on that, on really helping Nigeria to help themselves?
Well, I think that that is important. That's the way to tackle this problem once and for all. I think that President Trump has instilled at least some political will on behalf of the government to, within the government of Nigeria, to take some action. And it's absolutely essential to do this, both because religious freedom is a pillar of U.S. foreign policy. It's in compliance with the International Religious Freedom Act, which requires the president to review every foreign country to decide whether or not to designate it as a CPC, and that annually, and the year is ending, so it was appropriate that President Trump do that again. It's going to help alleviate just unfathomable human suffering, as we've seen in that mother's eyes today, to halt Nigeria's descent into failed state status or and avert possible civil war, and to not to deepen the spread of terror across West Africa. It's absolutely essential that Nigeria's government start engaging in the security of its own people. And again, there has been some willingness, political will, to fight the terror groups in the north, but there hasn't been any prosecution, so far successful prosecution, of any one from the Fulani militias at all. So I think that that's...
Just say that again for emphasis. There has not been, with the Fulani militias, efforts to...
So there hasn't been, and then that is, I think, more of a police work, and warfare is very different now. There's human intelligence is getting rarer and rarer. There's drone intelligence and other forms of technological methods. But I think that it's actually a relatively easy problem to solve, relatively. And it should start with that, and simultaneously actually work on the and help locate Leah Sharibu, you mentioned, and the Chibok schoolgirls that are still enslaved. You mentioned, Mr. Chairman, that there was intelligence sharing in the past, but nothing happened. I think that was a prime case of that, and that should be pursued. And can be pursued again fairly easily with modern technology, and it should happen across the country, including in the north. There should be cooperation and work on the terror groups and sealing the border and sharing our experience with that. President Trump's been very good with that. And we have a lot to impart, and if the government of Nigeria is willing, I think it would benefit all of us and the region.
Thank you very much. I think, consecutive U.S. administrations have defined or described the relationship with Nigeria as one of its most important on the continent. And even though that relationship has been complicated with, periods of friction, I think this moment that we find ourselves in seems as if all things have aligned, and there is an opportunity now for both the U.S. and Nigeria to come to the table to reset that relationship, especially given the fact that citizens across the board in Nigeria, every data point you look at, there's overwhelming acknowledgement that the levels of insecurity in the country are unacceptable. I think the fact that we have this coming from Nigerian citizens provides the opportunity to have real serious conversation based on concrete benchmarks for progress. The mistake that would be made is if it is seen as being a selective intervention favoring one group over the other. So there is an opportunity for Nigeria and the US to reset its relationship, one that would really be based on listening to the Nigerian people. And Nigerians are saying levels of insecurity are very high. How do we address it? So this opportunity now provides leverage to the US, working with the Nigerian government to actually show some very clear progress.
Okay, thank you very much. I would point out, and this is worth noting, because I was always perplexed with Secretary Blinken, and I asked him at hearings just like this, why he withdrew CPC, and I never got a good answer. But when we were doing the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998, I held all the hearings, most of them in this room. And John Shattuck, who was the Assistant Secretary for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, testified against it for the Clinton administration. On the record, I have all the records, you could go look at it. He said it would create a hierarchy of human rights, which is nonsense. And I even, in my response to him at one of the hearings, was to say, okay, I was all for combating apartheid, which was not a very popular thing within my party in the very beginning of the Reagan administration, and I was all for it. Did that take away any other human rights work we were doing? It was not in lieu of, it was in addition to what we were doing in any other area of human rights work. And I said the same thing about religious freedom. It is a pillar of our Constitution. It's a pillar of our, it's really a universally recognized human right. But they said it would set. 1 year later, I had a hearing on, did it do that? And I had the Ambassador at Large for Religious Freedom testify, because they were all saying, Shattuck especially, it would make everything worse on religious freedom. And the word back was, even after 1 year, it was seriously advancing religious freedom. Ditto on trafficking. I was told by Harold Coe, the Assistant Secretary for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, right from where we're sitting right now, that most of what was in my Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000 would be counterproductive. We don't need a tip office. We don't need all of the dozens of new programs that were unleashed by that law. And there was a bipartisan law. Sam Gagenson, who sat right here with me. It was my bill, but he was our principal co-sponsor, and we really worked together to get it passed. And he was from Connecticut. And again, as we went over year and after that, it was like, yeah, it really did help. But it was stopped in its tracks had we listened to that argument. Blinken was a part of that on the religious freedom back then, and I always felt, I could be wrong, that there was a sense that the Religious Freedom Act was not something he was terribly enamored of, so it was very easy to get rid of the CPC status for him, because he did not give a good answer when asked directly by me, and I wasn't the only one, where you sit, Nina, why? What's the why of it? And at one point he told the appropriators that there's none of this has anything to do with religious freedom, you know, in terms of the violence. Really, it just doesn't pass the straight face test. So that's, in my humble opinion, one of the reasons why we had such, again, and I remind everybody, it was Clinton who signed the International Religious Freedom Act. And we didn't know if he was going to do it. At the very end, we did have veto-proof majorities to overcome a veto. But that said, he did sign it, and I'm forever grateful for that. Ms. Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.